Hello, everyone. Just walking up down the hall and approaching my studio. And as Janet mentioned, I grew up in West Virginia and moved to New York in 1989, planning to stay for 3 months, and I've been here 30 years now. So, but when I landed in New York, I got a job with a New York City gallery and worked for the gallery for 12, 13 years while I continued to paint the entire time. At that time, my studio was at Broadway and Houston Street in the city. And I was painting abstractly, but during that process, the horizon line started creeping into my work. And I kind of felt like it was my soul wanting nature again. And so I ended up moving, finding that it was cheaper for me to live in the Hudson Valley than get a bigger apartment in New York City. And I moved to Cold Spring and had a studio in Beacon, and subsequently moved a studio to Peekskill, and then eventually to Atlas in Newburgh, where I've been since 2016. I no longer paint with the landscape. I think that series of work had a definite beginning, middle, and end, but I'm painting abstractly again, and I think my work is really about nature and being out of doors, and about movement. We'll see some specific works here that I can talk about as we get to those. My work, the abstract work, kind of has an aspect of looking like you're looking at something through a microscope, or I've also been told that they look like they're macroscopic too, like you're looking from a great distance, like at aerial views of places. And during the COVID pandemic, we weren't allowed to go into Atlas. So I started doing these smaller 14 by 14 inch paintings from front room in my home where I am right now. Um, and I had hoped by Open Studios this year, I'd be able to like fill the space with a grid of these 14 by 14 inch paintings. But I didn't participate this year in the Open Studios just out of precaution for the uh,
COVID.
COVID. Yeah.
So you say your work is inspired by nature, and like, so how is it? How do you get to these images?
Um, my painting, the landscape paintings, and you'll see some of those were very much about the Hudson River and riverscapes or oceanscapes. And when I started working more abstractly again, I wanted to really experiment with the paint, working wet on wet, and I just feel like the imagery comes from being out of doors. This black and white one coming up is one of the first ones I did when I was started working abstractly. I was invited at the Layla Heller Gallery to be in an exhibition, a group show called Black and White, and I didn't quite know how I was going to translate the landscape into black and white and make it look effective. And so I started just layering wet paint until I got this effect, which to me it's very much about water and like I say, movement of the water and waves and foam, and things kind of progress from there. And um, yeah, that's how I ended up that way. And I see influences from the works. Like here's one of the earlier seascapes. And the title of that is Kiel Och, which is a Gaelic word for, it's a term that I don't think there's quite an English translation, but it's about the thin place where water meets the sky. I used to kayak a lot and spend a lot of time on the river. And so these are some of those earlier paintings. Kayak in Foundry Cove at Cold Spring or around the area.
Do you work from memory?
I do. It's kind of, I listen to music while I'm working and feel like I just kind of, when I step outside myself and let just the paint and the process take over, then I feel that's when it's most successful. If I think too much about it, I don't think they work so well. I get tightened up.
And
They,
do you work on the easel?
I don't. I usually work flat. I'll put paintings on the easel to add detail and all, or work back into the works once I've gotten the effect I want. That's one of the most recent paintings that I've done. And my titles often derive from the music I'm listening to while I'm painting.
What kind of music do you listen to?
I like all types of music, and when I just don't want to think about it, there's a Sirius XM channel called Chill that just plays kind of ambient music that I like a lot. There's a young Australian musician now that I really like a lot named Tash Sultana, or a British musician as well named James Blake, who I like both of their style of music. And I work on square format. I think I find something very comforting about the square shape.
Have you always worked in square, even when you did landscapes?
I did, yeah. And this one was inspired by, I had some lilies that were this dark maroon color called Lilium night flyers. And so that was, I'm an avid gardener, and that one was inspired by the garden.
Mm. So are these acrylic?
They're acrylic on wood panels, and I treat the acrylic kind of like watercolor. And of course, the great thing about that is then I can work over top without losing what I've got underneath. And occasionally a painting will work on the very first go round, and if not, then I have to work back into it.
Mm. Now, I know the pandemic influenced the scale of your work. I mean, do you feel like, COVID or these last few months, if you've been, affected in other ways besides?
I don't think I've been as productive as I normally would be, just by not getting to the studios frequently. Um, Sarah asked me about that when we filmed this, and one thing I've noticed I've done a lot more of, which I think everything I do is part of my art process and influences me, but I've been reading a lot more during the pandemic, taking a lot of time sitting in the garden reading. And I do keep a journal and a sketchbook, sketch diary, so um,
Is that part of a daily practice of yours?
yeah, I try to do entries every day.
In the journal and the sketchbook? You
Yeah,
two separate, or is it one?
it's one.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Nice.
process notes and writing, and how my day's been, things like that. And while I'm listening, I get titles, like I said, from music, and I'll write that. I just use the wall to write that down with.
That's funny. Jonathan Talbot just asked, are there titles?
Yeah, not everything has a title, but I try to. Now, what we're looking at here is a series I did of works on paper before last year's Open Studios. And to me, these are all about movement and dance. And I was doing a dance group on Sunday evenings in Cold Spring. And I just really feel like the movement is really obvious in these. There's a yoga studio here that does it's a 5 rhythms dance movement. Some of you may be familiar with that. But I really feel like it was reflected in this body of work that I did on paper. And to me, these are kind of, if you will, they're my drawings. I was using a graphite acrylic and on buff paper so that I could add white to highlight and emphasize.
Melinda Burkhardt asked, what is a 5 rhythms dance like?
It was a movement that this woman named Gabrielle Roth founded in the New York City in the 70s. And she studied indigenous tribes who went into trance states through movement. And she felt that all people, when they're dancing, move through 5 movements. It's flowing, staccato, chaos, lyrical, and stillness. And doing one of these dance classes, they take you through all five rhythms, and they call going through the five rhythms a wave. But you really do have like this physical and emotional release while you're doing it. It's sort of like you start out very slow and moving, and then the music picks up, the beat picks up, and you get kind of in a frenzy, and then it slows down again until you kind of collapse into meditation on the floor. So it's really fun, and like I say, quite a release.
Wow.
And I think my work has been more and more influenced by that, although since COVID, we haven't been able to meet the stance group. We've done a couple outdoors, and that's about it. And here's one of the pieces.
Very cool. So what is a success to you, Richard?
Success?
Yeah.
You know, I've shown with different galleries. I've made sales. I've had dry periods, and to me, the most important part is making the work and having the time to make the work. And you know, to me, that's being really successful.
That sounds like a great answer.
That's how I feel about it.
Mhm.
You know, and you know, sort of, if I make a sale, then that's a perk to making the work. But you know, I don't know. I get a lot out of the painting itself.
Mhm.